All right, ready to dive into the London Underground.
The Tube.
That's the one. We're using this London travel newsletter to guide us today.
Yeah, it's got some really interesting stuff in it.
So picture this. You're in London for the first time.
How exciting.
You want to see it all with
Yeah.
Big Ben, Buckingham Palace, the whole shebang.
The works.
But then you see that tube map, and it's just
Mess of lines.
exactly like a tangled ball of yarn.
But honestly, once you get the hang of it, the tube's actually pretty easy to use.
That's what we're here to figure out.
Right. First things first, this newsletter mentions the tube generally runs from 5 a.m. to midnight.
Okay, so that's pretty much all day.
Monday through Saturday, that is, with things winding down a bit earlier on Sundays.
I guess even Londoners need their sleep.
Of course. But if you are looking for a late-night adventure,
Oh, tell me more.
you've got the night tube.
The night tube.
Yep, it runs on certain lines all night on Fridays and Saturdays.
So you could be out in London all night?
See a show, grab some late-night food, you name it.
That's really cool, like the city that never sleeps.
It definitely opens up a lot of possibilities.
But what if you want to see London from, say, a different angle?
The newsletter actually touches on that.
Oh.
They talk about the Uber boat by Thames Clippers.
Okay, so we're on the river now.
Exactly. You get to see those iconic landmarks from the water.
Now that sounds like a proper London experience.
Plus, they have cafe bars right on board.
So you can enjoy the view with a drink in hand.
Makes the commute a bit more enjoyable, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But whether you're on the tube or the boat, planning ahead seems key.
Definitely. The newsletter really emphasizes that.
Especially if you've only got limited time in London.
Right, and they mention you can find free PDF maps and guides online.
That's super helpful, like having a cheat sheet for the city.
Exactly. And speaking of things to explore, this newsletter also highlights some amazing food.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm always up for trying local delicacies.
Well, there's this section called Yum,
Yum, love it.
and they tease the ultimate London bakery.
But they don't give an address.
Nope, just a description that makes your mouth water.
So it's like a delicious mystery.
It definitely makes you curious.
And while we're on the topic of things that sound amazing,
What's that?
the newsletter also has a link to a visitor's guide to royal palaces, castles, and residences in the UK.
Ah, yes, I saw that.
Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle. So much history to explore,
It's hard to narrow down, isn't it?
for sure. And the best part is, the tube can get you to many of these places.
Right. It's not just about getting around, it's about connecting to all the amazing things London has to offer.
I love that perspective, the tube as a gateway to history and culture.
Exactly. So we've covered the basics of the tube, some alternative ways to get around, and even a glimpse into the food and royal history that awaits.
We've definitely set the stage for our London adventure.
And there's still so much more to uncover.
All right, so we've got our tube map. We know the hours. We're ready for those late-night tube rides.
But where to go, right?
Exactly. So many options.
Well, the newsletter actually highlights a specific borough in its top 10 places to visit.
Oh, which one?
Islington.
Islington, okay. I'm not super familiar with that area.
It's in North London, known for its kind of artsy, diverse vibe.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
You've got trendy restaurants next to these old historic buildings, bustling markets.
Sounds charming.
Very much so.
So, what kind of things can you do in Islington?
Well, it's got a really vibrant theater scene, especially around the West End.
Oh, that's right near there, isn't it?
Easily accessible by tube.
Perfect.
Plus, they have beautiful parks if you want some peace and quiet.
Sounds like a good mix of activities.
Definitely something for everyone.
Now, how do I actually get to Islington using the tube?
There are a few different options depending on where you're coming from, but the Victoria Line, Northern Line, and Piccadilly Line all have stations in Islington.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind when planning my route.
Sounds good.
Now, remember that Ultimate London Bakery the newsletter mentioned?
Yeah, the one with no address?
Any more clues about where it might be?
Sadly, no. Maybe they're saving that info for premium subscribers.
Makes you want to sign up, doesn't it?
A little bit.
Okay, well, while we're on the topic of sweet treats, the Around the Web section did have a link for this place called Cake and Flowers.
Cake and flowers.
I know, right? Sounds too good to be true.
What is it exactly?
It's this cool collaboration between a pastry chef and a florist.
Wow, so you can get your cake and admire some beautiful flowers at the same time.
Apparently, and it all takes place at the Dorchester.
To Dorchester? Fancy.
Of course, it had to be somewhere glamorous.
Speaking of glamorous, we can't forget about those royal palaces and castles.
Right. So much history.
The UK is just full of it, and many of these places are near tube stations, too.
Convenient. So, do you have a favorite? Or one you'd recommend for a first-timer?
Windsor Castle is pretty spectacular.
What's special about Windsor Castle?
Well, it's the oldest and largest occupied castle in the world,
Wow, that's impressive.
and it's just a short train ride from London.
Okay, that's definitely going on the list.
Dip choice.
Now, what about Buckingham Palace? Can you get there easily by tube?
Absolutely. Several stations are within walking distance, like Green Park, Hyde Park Corner, St. James's Park.
Perfect.
So many options.
You know what I love about the tube?
What's that?
It's not just about getting to your destination, it's about the journey itself.
Right, you get to see a different side of London.
All those people, those announcements, you really feel the pulse of the city.
It's a unique experience for sure.
So as we plan our London adventure, let's think of those tube lines as pathways to something special,
I like that.
like piecing together a puzzle of delicious pastries, royal history, and those charming London streets.
Exactly. And in our final part, we'll give you some practical tips for mastering the tube and making the most of your time in London.
All right, we've covered so much ground in this London Underground deep dive,
It's been a whirlwind tour of the tube, hasn't it?
from operating hours and the night tube
Right, and let's not forget.
to Islington and those tempting treats.
Oh yeah, all those bakeries and palaces.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah,
let's give our listeners some key takeaways and tips.
absolutely. Like a little cheat sheet for their London adventure.
Perfect. So remind us about those tube operating hours one more time.
Okay, remember, it's generally 5 a.m. to midnight
Got it.
with slightly shorter hours on Sundays.
Right. Those Londoners need their rest.
But if you are out and about late on a Friday or Saturday, don't forget about the night tube.
The night tube, that's a game changer.
Keeps the city going all night.
All right, now let's say I'm standing in a tube station for the first time.
Okay, I can see it now.
What do I do?
Well, first things first, grab a tube map.
Okay, where do I find one of those?
Usually there are stands at the stations, or you can download one on your phone,
Gotcha.
and then just take a moment to familiarize yourself with the lines and colors.
Okay, there are a lot of lines,
Yeah, it can look a bit overwhelming at first.
but it's color-coded, so that helps.
Right, each line has its own color.
And don't be afraid to ask for help if you get lost, right?
Oh, absolutely. Londoners are generally quite helpful, in my experience.
Okay, good to know.
And if you're really worried about getting turned around,
Yeah,
plan your route beforehand.
that's where those free PDF maps and guides come in handy.
Exactly.
Planning is key, especially if you don't have a lot of time in London.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, I do want to touch on those alternative transport options one last time.
Yes.
That Uber boat sounds like a must-do.
It's such a fun way to see the city.
And those onboard cafe bars, come on.
It adds a little something extra to your commute, right?
Absolutely. Okay, for all the foodies listening,
Let's talk treats.
any parting words of wisdom about those culinary gems we discussed?
Well, if you find that ultimate London bakery, do let us know.
Right. We need to solve that mystery.
And for a truly unique experience, don't forget about cake and flowers.
At the fancy Dorchester.
Exactly.
All right, I feel like I'm ready to go.
Me too.
I've got my tube map, my itinerary is full of bakeries and royal palaces,
Sounds like a good trip.
and I'm ready to experience the night tube.
Before we send everyone off on their London adventure,
Yeah.
one last thing to remember.
What's that?
Embrace the tube journey itself.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
It's more than just a way to get around.
Okay.
It's like a little slice of London life.
Yeah, I could see that.
All those diverse passengers, the energy, those glimpses of history.
That's about soaking in the atmosphere.
Exactly. Pay attention to those little details.
Now, here's a question for you and all our listeners.
Okay, I like questions.
If you had just one day in London,
Just one day.
what tube route would you take and what would you see?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It's a big decision.
Well, I think I'd start with the Piccadilly line.
Okay, where would that take you?
To South Kensington to visit the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Oh, excellent choice.
Then I'd hop on the Circle line over to Westminster.
To see Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament? Can't miss those.
And of course, no London trip is complete without a stop at a traditional pub.
For some fish and chips.
Exactly.
Well, there you have it, folks. Our London Underground deep dive.
Hope you enjoyed it.
We've covered everything from the basics of riding the tube.
To some of the amazing things you can see and do.
And of course, we can't forget about those delicious treats.
Always got to have some treats.
Be sure to check out the links in our show notes for all the tube maps and guides.
And all those destinations we talked about.
We hope this inspires you to plan your own London adventure.
Happy travels, everyone!